That's 10 of my colleagues massacred in Gaza. 10 in less than 2 years. This is Anas Sharif. He should be here talking, not me. I'm going to read part of his will to you, because this is, for me, the message of humanity. This is my will and my final message. If these words reach you, know that Israel has succeeded in killing me and silencing my voice. I have lived through pain in all its details, tasted suffering and lost many times, yet I never once hesitated to convey the truth as it is, without distortion or falsification, so that Allah may bear witness against those who stayed silent, those who accepted our killing, those who choked our breath, and those whose hearts were unmoved by the scattered remains of our children and women, doing nothing to stop the massacres that our people have faced for more than a year and a half. I urge you not to let chains silence you, nor borders restrain you. Be bridges towards the liberation of the land and its people until the sun of dignity and freedom rises over our stolen homeland. I entrust you to take care of my family, of my daughter, of my son, of my beloved mother, of my lifelong companion, my wife. I urge you to stand by them. If I die steadfast upon my principles. Do not forget Gaza, and do not forget me in your sincere prayers and forgiveness and acceptance. This was on the 6th of April 2025. Journalists like Anas Sharif and others have been writing their letters of farewell to the world, and they've been storing them in hospitals for us to read them after they're dead. Why? Because humanity has failed them. They have no hope in being saved or protected. They have to write their letters months before they were killed. Anas was killed months after this letter. In the hospitals of Gaza, journalists are taking shelter, hoping that it's a safe place where they can work, and then they're bombed in a double war crime where the journalist is a war crime. Killing journalists is a war crime, and then bombing them in a hospital is a double war crime. How many of you here had to write a farewell letter doing their jobs? Anybody? Anybody has had to do that? No, because we shouldn't be doing that as journalists. Humanity has failed our colleagues in Gaza, and now 249 have been killed by Israel. It's a record. It's more than journalists killed in the 2 world wars, in the War of the Balkans, in the War of Vietnam, and the War of Afghanistan put together in less than 2 years. It's a massacre. And Wednesday this week, how many of you heard about the journalist massacre? 26 of them in one bombing in Yemen. Did any of you hear about it or report about it? Who bombed them? Israel, because Israel is murdering journalists to kill the witness. Where is the outcry from the journalist community? Silence is complicity. Sometimes it's even worse than silence. There is active complicity by some media organizations that contribute to the justification of killing Palestinian journalists by repeating propaganda and lies spewed by the perpetrator accusing journalists of being terrorists. Palestinian journalists are dehumanized in an asymmetric, biased media coverage, which reflects the same way the Palestinians and Israelis are covered in an asymmetric way. Palestinians die in an explosion as if it's like a blast in a kitchen. And Israelis, it's very clear in the headlines. They are killed, and always humanized. Luckily, humanity always rises. People are sailing to Gaza as we speak. People are taking to the streets to speak up. Luckily, there is humanity in those people, fraternity, solidarity, and hope. So fellow journalists, our responsibility is clear: to practice journalism with a human face, to protect dignity, not destroy it. To serve the public, not power, not to repeat propaganda, not to fail our fellow journalists, to stand with humanity, not with propaganda. Last May, in his audience with journalists, His Holiness Pope Leo XIV reminded us, communication and journalism do not exist outside of time and history. St. Augustine said, "Let us live well, and the times will be good. We are the times." We are the times, fellow journalists. We shape how humanity will be remembered. We are participants in the moral horizon of our time. So I urge you, be true to journalism, Act as true journalists. Change the status quo. Don't allow journalists in Gaza to feel abandoned. Don't allow humanity to continue failing my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
This is to them. This should be to them.
Thanks, Director, for your witness. Now we hear Arvelao Miro, Director del Comercio, Peru.
Thank you, Father Fortunato. I'm deeply honored to be part of this World Meeting on Human Fraternity and to be able to share important, meaningful, and heartfelt reflections like the one we have just heard. I represent El Comercio, which is a newspaper in Peru that's 186 years old. So our long history carries not only the weight of tradition, but the constant challenge of renewing our commitment to truth, to dialogue, and service of society. I believe that we live in a world marked by contradictions. While technology has allowed us to connect across borders instantly, it has also created echo chambers that divide us. While access to information has never been so broad, disinformation spreads with alarming speed. In this complex landscape, the role of journalism is not only to inform, but to build bridges of understanding, to give context, to defend facts, seeking always for the truth. To practice journalism with a human face means that stories should not reduce people to statistics or labels, but portray them in their dignity and complexity. It means that we reflect different points of view with empathy and allow people to see that they're fairly reflected in our coverage. We are storytellers of what it means to be human in our time. What we choose to highlight, the way we tell the stories, and the voices we elevate shape how societies perceive themselves and others. And if we focus solely on division, we risk fueling the very stories we report on. But if we make space for stories of hope, collaboration, dignity, we contribute to opening paths towards dialogue. We were asked to think about metrics of journalism of fraternity. One that comes to mind is diversity of sources. Another is how many of our stories offer solution, pathways for action, and not only problems. But a key issue that we have to handle as media is trust and accountability. Are we transparent with our sources and methods? Do we have visible correction policies? Do we include contact information in our stories? Do we allow our readers, our audiences, to provide feedback, to provide comments? At El Comercio, as I told you, a newspaper that has been in the life of Peru almost since its independence, we know that our mission extends beyond the newsroom walls. We do more than provide information. We're committed to causes that are important for society. And I want to give you just two examples of how we try to practice journalism with a human face. Every month, we organize audiencias vecinales, which are assemblies where we unite residents of different districts of Lima with their mayors. The first session, we gather their opinions and concerns about their community and have them form groups to work together on questions they would like to ask to their authorities. The following week, we return with the mayor, who sits in front of the residents and must answer those questions. In the next days, our journalists follow to see if the promises are being kept. What we seek with these neighborhood hearings is to open participation, dialogue, proposals, trust, but also to hold authorities accountable. This is a great opportunity to bring community closer, and it also helps us to learn more about the issues that concern our society the most. So far, we have already organized 26 assemblies in Lima, and we're planning to reach other cities in Peru. In the other example, 5 years ago, alongside UNICEF, we launched the School Correspondence Program, where more than 3,000 children from all 24 regions of Peru have reported about the problems facing their communities, guided by 30 of our journalists. This is a way that we find where from a very young age we contribute to share and teach the responsibility and service of journalism and connect with kids, teachers, their parents, through empathy, storytelling, and shared meaning. These are just a few examples of how we try to get closer to people, to open channels of participation, to be a center of ideas, of debates, and a meeting point of Peruvians. And I think that each of us in this meeting, in their own particular reality and their particular countries, are making these kinds of initiatives that I think can be very helpful to connect a lot more with society. Thank you, Father Fortunato, for this opportunity.
Thanks. Chibosky Thomas, Presidente and Executive Chief, CBS, United States.
Thank you, Father Enzo. I appreciate all of the comments so far. As the President of CBS News in America, I'm honored to be here with all of you and speaking and reflecting on journalism that serves the common good. And those three important words: dignity, freedom, and truth. The basic definition of journalism, the kind I learned at journalism school in Boston, was who, what, when, where, why. Tell the full story. But in these very challenging and fractured times, that's not always the case. Today's media has grown increasingly partisan, with many news organizations evolving into advocacy platforms that cater to and reinforce the beliefs of like-minded audiences. At CBS News, we report on events across the world, always unfolding, often at breakneck speed. We're constantly moving from one story to the next, frequently shifting from one tragedy to another as we work to keep pace with an increasingly fast-moving and complex world. A nurse in Gaza, a soldier in Ukraine, a grandmother in Israel, a flood victim in Texas, horrific murders of political figures in our own country. But behind each story we tell is a person. We have to remember that first and foremost. Someone living through the very headlines that we're covering. And in the rush of the news cycle, that can be easy to forget. That is why we, all of us, must approach every story and every individual with dignity and respect, with humility and honesty, with delicacy and determination. Because how we tell the story matters just as much as the story we choose to tell. The truth and facts are essential, but they're not enough on their own. We must deliver them with compassion and an open mind, with clear eyes that see each story objectively and a determination to report without agenda. And now, we all know we face the added challenge, navigating this world shaped by AI and deepfakes and an overwhelming flood of misinformation. The digital landscape is noisy, and it's fueled by social media platforms that reward speed, outrage, virality over nuance and accuracy. This is a genie that is long out of the bottle, and in a world where both individuals and outlets compete fiercely for attention, as we've talked about, the stakes for journalism have never been higher. In this environment, the question is no longer just how we stand out, but what do we stand for? At CBS News, we have been challenged like never before in our 98-year history. We're much younger than you. But the institution famous for Walter Cronkite and Edward R. Murrow is faced with an existential question. Do we cling to the status quo, or do we evolve, adapt, and modernize, not just to survive, but to connect with a new generation of news consumers who expect more than just the facts? As a devout Catholic, I see stark parallels with the Catholic Church, an institution we often report on. Among them, like the Church, we face a noticeable absence of younger voices and viewers. And just as young people are asking faith questions, they're asking us, what do you really stand for? And meanwhile, new forms of faith, new religious influencers are rising, harnessing the power of digital platforms to spread their message with speed and resonance. With a single post, a compelling idea can instantly connect with those who feel seen, heard, and aligned. We are wired to be tribal, to belong to something bigger than ourselves. And in today's hyper-connected world, it has never been easier to build that tribe, or even a digital faith, whether rooted in religion, ideology, or a trusted source of news. This past week, Pope Leo canonized our newest saint, Carlo Acutis. Saint Acutis, often called God's influencer, understood something important and profound, that technology, when used with intention, can elevate truth rather than distort it. So, we now find ourselves at this critical crossroads. That's what this important conversation is about. How we preserve dignity, uphold freedom, and pursue truth in a way that fosters a more civil and less fractured public discourse. One that earns trust, especially from the next generation, whose attention and belief in institutions are harder than ever to secure. Perhaps it is simple as reflecting on Pope Francis's culture of encounter, which calls on us to move beyond indifference and build a society rooted in compassion, dialogue, and respect for every person's dignity. It's about meeting others, especially those who are different from us, with empathy, openness, and a willingness to listen. Finally, we have a responsibility to one another, both as people and as journalists in the news business. This responsibility extends to the next generation of aspiring journalists. Perhaps some are here right now. We must guide them, show them that this path is demanding but deeply meaningful, and that curiosity and compassion, not cynicism, are what truly drive great reporting. What we do matters. It's never been more crucial that we get it right. We're counting on that next generation and everyone here to help blaze the path forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Presidente. Then now, Conto Luigi, Director of ANSA Italy.
Buonasera, grazie.
Good evening and thank you for this interesting conversation and for inviting me here. Father Fortunato, we're going through challenging times, very challenging, and journalists are right in the middle. They are bearing witness of what is happening around us. Famine, wars, financial battle, just to say the least. And we are bombarded by messages, sound, sign, emotions that make us lose the sense of reality. We are in a total chaos where everything is similar and cannot be distinguished. And we don't know whether what we have in front of us is true or false, if the piece of news has been verified or not. They are disoriented, especially young, fragile people, those who cannot understand what is happening. And often also those who can understand sometimes do not challenge what they see because it's useful for their own interest, for their ideology, for their ultimate interests. I say see and not read because I think we don't read anymore. We don't go deep into the news any longer with the risk of losing the sense of reality and of the truth. Glued in front of the screen like we are children, attracted by colors, the sounds, not knowing whether they are harmful or not, close or not. Just see an image and think that is true. And the sense of what is happening is no longer clear, and having an awareness. In the past, the family used to say, it was said by the TV. And my son told me, but this is the news by Facebook. And I say, who is Facebook? And he glared at me, no answer. We are in a totally uncontrolled situation. Public discussion has become a radicalized arena where the thesis of a Nobel laureate is worth the same as a teenager's opinion. And the reality has been put in a corner. In this chaotic situation, artificial intelligence has arrived, and it's even easier now to manipulate everything. And the truth is now an alternative truth, the one we want to construct, that should not be confused with different opinions about reality. If the criteria for reality is changed, even by those who are at the government, we confuse the perception of reality. Of course, speaking about truth is very difficult. Each story can be told in a different and interpreted in a different way. But if we cannot make people understand that there are realities, are historical, scientific, social truth, that have to be considered in order to decide our future, we have lost the battle. People are no longer aware of what's happening. In the night of 2022, we woke up with a dictator who said on TV that they had invaded Ukraine to liberate it from Nazi fascism. The President of the United States said that there is a genocide of white people in Africa. Pandemics was a big pharma story. They created it. And this brings me back to where I started from. We got lost. We have no sense of what the reality around us. What can we do? The answer's not easy. We have to keep going, informing correctly, respecting the code of conduct, the ethics, and we have to respect weak groups and to tell facts as they are, not as we would like them to be. We have to fight against fake news with real facts, going to the location and see with our eyes, fighting against the propaganda and the arrogance of those who want to govern the world through militarism. We have to do a lot. If information becomes part of these radical approaches, if we do not denounce this conflict of interest, if we do not disclaim all this, if we do not respect the historical truth, we are going to lose our role and our freedom. Thank you.
Thanks, Direttore. Thanks. De Villa Sergio, Editor-Chief, Folha de São Paulo, Brasile. I am seeing that the time is good.
Okay.
Continue. We can continue.
Thank you, Father Enzo, for putting together this very important meeting. First, let me say that it is an honor to share this table with all colleagues, but especially with Maria Ressa, Peace Nobel Prize winner in 2021. I like to think that when she was awarded, the whole professional journalism was awarded. Secondly, my solidarity to the colleague of Al Jazeera Qatar, Mrs. Al-Khatib. As journalism, I believe that we share your pain. When a journalist dies, the whole profession suffers. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, journalism may feel like a modern profession, but its core values are as old as the scripture. In the Bible, we read, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." That is journalism's mission, to seek and to communicate the truth. Another verse tells us, "Do not bear false witness against your neighbor." That is fact-checking, long before the age of fake news. And still another, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute." That is giving voice to the voiceless, the very heart of reporting. Even Paul once said, "Woe to me if I do not announce the good news," a reminder that informing others is not just a task, but a duty. These ancient words echo the mission of journalism today, to defend dignity, to uphold freedom, and to tell the truth. And yet, we live in an age when words can wound as much as weapons. We have seen falsehoods travel faster than facts, and slogans shouted louder than dialogue. In times like this, the very act of speaking the truth becomes revolutionary. And the discipline of using words to heal, not to harm, becomes urgent. This world meeting on human fraternity asks a profound question. What does it mean to be human today? The answer, I believe, begins with how we use words. Communication is not just about transmitting information. It is about creating relationships. It is about recognizing the dignity of the other, even when that other is different, distant, or disagreeable. Dignity, freedom, truth, three words that should be the compass of information in our century. Dignity because every human being has value, always and in every circumstance, as the late Pope Francis reminds us. In that sense, journalists should resist the easy way of reducing people to stereotypes or enemies. It reminds us that behind every statistic there is a story, behind every headline, a human life. Freedom, because without free voices, societies fall silent under the weight of fear. Freedom of expression is not only the right to speak, it is also the responsibility to listen to those without microphone, without platform, without power. Truth, because without truth there is no trust, and without trust there can be no fraternity. Truth today is fragile, often drowned in propaganda or in algorithms of profit. Yet it remains resilient, waiting to be uncovered by honest reporting, by courageous testimony, by the humble act of verifying and telling it as it is. Yesterday in Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro was sentenced to prison. The Brazilian press covered the truth that a trial was held and justice was done. In the newsroom of Folha de São Paulo, the Brazilian newspaper where I serve as editor-in-chief, we like to think that professional journalism is a powerful antidote to fake news. Fraternity in communication is not a naive concept. It does not mean hiding conflicts. It means facing them without hatred, exposing injustice without dehumanizing, criticizing power without destroying the possibility of dialogue. Words that disarm are words that refuse to mirror the violence they describe. In journalism, we often say that news is the first draft of history. If that is true, then we must ensure this draft is written with dignity, freedom, and truth. Otherwise, history itself risks being armed with lies. The intention of this meeting reminds us that fraternity is both a gift and a task. It becomes visible when it generates new forms of solidarity. That solidarity begins with language, when you choose a word that heals instead of a word that hurts. So let us commit ourselves as journalists, communicators, citizens to use words that disarm, because only then can our conversations become what they are meant to be, not battlegrounds of opinion, but meeting grounds of humanity. Grazie, thank you.
Thanks. Dareni Khaled, Director, Kasbah Tribune, Africa.
Algeria.
Algeria, yes, sorry.
It's an honor for me to be among you today as an independent Algerian journalist. I am proud to take part in this great conference on fraternity, which also highlights the importance of journalism and the crucial role that journalists can play in each of other societies. I come from a country, Algeria, which for many years suffered from the lack of information, particularly during the Black Decade from 1992 and 2002, and which is now striving to rebuild the journalism that is responsible, independent, and free. I myself paid a heavy price for my freedom in 2020 and 2021 when I was among the journalists who covered the Iraq protests that began in February 2019. I'm proud to represent many of my fellow male and female colleagues who fight every day for a free and independent press. Our role as journalists today is, of course, to fight against false information, but it's also to be responsible toward all those who read us, watch us, and listen to us. Our mission as journalists is also to promote fraternity and friendship among peoples, even with those who have harmed us in the past, as, for example, from a country, Algeria, which endured 132 years of colonization. I had the honor in February 2017 to interview the French president who recognized that colonization was a crime against humanity. That interview reignited the debate of colonization and the need to ask for forgiveness. I believe it's also the journalist's duty to revive such debates, to enrich them with ideas, and ultimately to help bring about fraternity even after suffering. I also come from a Muslim country. This does not prevent us from being tolerant and showing understanding, including toward our Christian friends and brothers who have had a very important presence in Algeria, particularly through Saint Agostino, the family to which the current Pope belongs. I also speak to you today as a human, as an Algerian, and as a representative of Reporters Without Borders. And it's impossible not to mention the tragedy that have been affecting Palestinian journalists for the past 2 years in Gaza Strip. More than 200 of them have been murdered, making it the deadliest toll of journalists killed since the existence of our profession, more than during the 2 world wars and the Vietnam and Korean wars. My organization has filed 4 complaints with the International Criminal Court against Israel to ensure that the full truth is revealed about the death of all these journalists. We will never stop reminding everyone that targeting journalists is a war crime. It's to all my Palestinian colleagues that my through and prayers go out today. It's thanks to them and their sacrifice that we can still practice our profession today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dareni from Algeria. Thanks again. Ellis Graham, Controller, BBC Audio, United Kingdom.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Father Enzo. Dear friends, it's a great pleasure to be with you here in Rome today at this remarkable gathering of minds and voices and to represent the BBC. The BBC's official motto is "Nation shall speak peace unto nation." We chose it almost 100 years ago, but it's never been more relevant than it is today. Because for us, it's not a slogan, it's a vision. A belief that dialogue, understanding, and truth can cross borders, bridge cultures, and build peace. Information is no longer scarce. It's superabundant, overwhelming. But truth, trust, understanding, mutual respect, they're in shorter supply. At its best, information isn't noise, it's nourishment. It helps us to understand each other, to hold power to account, and to make good decisions which shape our lives and society for the better. The BBC exists to serve the public. We reach hundreds of millions of people every week in 40 languages. We do so with a commitment to impartiality, accuracy, and independence. But friends, the media and information landscape in which we exist is far from easy. Democracy and media freedom are on the retreat. Disinformation is thriving. Deep fakes blur the line between the real and the artificial. And AI is reshaping how information is created and consumed. So we face a crisis not just of truth, but of shared reality. And when people can no longer agree on what is real, it becomes harder to agree on what is right. Without understanding, empathy withers, and those with whom we disagree become enemies instead of friends with different views. At the BBC, we're responding. We've launched BBC Verify, a team dedicated to fact-checking, source analysis, and transparency. We're exploring AI responsibly, guided by principles which prioritize human creativity. And we're investing in media literacy, especially for young people, helping them to navigate the digital world with critical thinking and confidence. This is an area in which educators, including the Church, have a huge role to play. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis speaks of a culture of encounter, a way of approaching others with openness. He reminds us that fraternity is not an abstract ideal, but a lived reality. That resonates with our mission and indeed this discussion here today, because reliable, worthwhile information, nourishing information, is not just about transmission. It's about encounter between speaker and listener, between journalists and citizen, between cultures and nations. The task which faces all of us is to build a global culture of information that is fair, responsible, and respects the dignity of our citizens. But that's not to say we should shrink from reporting inconvenient truths and unpalatable facts. I sometimes hear the view that the world would be a better, happier place if only journalists would bring us more good news stories. But the role of the mainstream media is to provide reliable information, not soothing messages. As the British novelist George Orwell said, if liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. We should cherish that liberty. Too many people don't have it. Thank you.
Thanks. Fenoglio Jérôme, Editor-in-Chief Le Monde Francia.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Thank you very much. The Le Monde, the newspaper that is now celebrating 80 years of existence. And this newspaper that was started many years ago can be based on one word of your invitation. Our story has always tried to increase dignity, giving everyone the possibility to know the truth, to reject ignorance, and enrich the diversity of public debate. Just the opposite of what we see around us. We're often convinced in our newspaper, but all of us are convinced that news information is not a show, is not a commodity, is not something we should manipulate. I would like to tell our story without wanting to teach you anything, but I would like to go back to some enriching criteria. And thank you very much for the discussion today. I would like to share with you some humble practice that are based on freedom. They are seeking freedom, and information has arisen. This truth is something that can be obtained by working hard and explaining. Our job is something important. In the last few years, we have learned to make the difference between what is established and what is uncertain and what we do not know. And when we make a mistake, we have to correct it visibly and rapidly, because we are not infallible, and the truth of the reader can be consolidated only if we're able to correct our mistakes. We learned, as you said, that words can really construct bridges, can speak about flows, migrants. This is not neutral terminology, but is giving a possibility to these people, giving them a place. Freedom is not something we shall proclaim, but have to organize. We really want journalist freedom, and this goes through all the pressure outside, the freedom of each of us that increases the strength of these of us. So it's not something that belongs only to Le Monde, but to our reader who read us for their opinion, not for our opinion. And what is important in this discussion is the following. A loyal discussion doesn't make a newspaper fragile, it honors it. We have to give space to information that go against the mainstream, and we have to consider opponents and not enemies. Unanimity is something that has to be understood. Disarming words doesn't mean making arguments aseptic. Doesn't mean reducing or masking divergence and differences of opinion. Newspaper and journalists have to pay respect to the different opinion and construct a common ground, and this common ground is based on facts, thanks to our investigation, to analyzing the different opinions. It's not just by chance that the three professions that are investigating news, like journalists, but also judges and scientists, they have this common ground, and they have been attacked, the three professions, and this shows that this common ground is very important and vital, because we have to have a negotiation ability and the possibility to reconstruct the peace. We have to resist and fight all together. And this fraternity really makes sense. We have to work continuously in order to nourish agreement and fraternity. And in very simple terms, we want to maintain human being at the center, at the heart of everything. We have to look for liberty. Liberty doesn't close discussion. It makes it possible thanks to fact-finding and the modesty and humility to correct our mistakes. We have no lesson to teach. We have a common goal. Our words have to be close to the story they tell, and our word has to be better understood. Thank you.
Thanks again. Gallagher Tony, Editor-in-Chief of the Times, United Kingdom.
Thank you, Father Enzo, and for the privilege of coming to this event and the pleasure of being around so many distinguished colleagues. Sitting in the Protomoteca Hall, we're in the company of some of Italy's most prominent historic artists and literary figures, whose sculpted portraits adorn the room. One of the most notable is Aldo Manuzio, a pioneer of printing presses more than 500 years ago, an innovator who created the portable book. Manuzio made the great texts of antiquity widely available across Europe. In doing so, he helped shape the intellectual culture of the Renaissance. Today, we're at the early stages of another communication revolution, unleashed by powerful new technology at the intersection of artificial intelligence, social media, and the internet. The early signs are that the impact of society will be just as momentous as it was in the Renaissance. So too are the risks. While words can indeed disarm by creating a level playing field of knowledge, they can also be weaponized through the distribution of fake news designed to destabilize society. Printing press technology was a boon to creators of fake news. They ranged from England's 17th century levelers, radical polemicists who promoted unverified claims to undermine the legitimacy of Parliament, to France's libellists, 18th century underground writers of scandal sheets who falsely claimed Marie Antoinette was promiscuous. As printing press technology settled, regulation caught up, and rules were rolled out that were designed to curb the worst excesses, such as slander. Businesses that stake their reputation on the veracity of what they publish came to dominate the media landscape after the Second World War. The Times in the UK is often referred to as the newspaper of record. Our team of editors and lawyers take great care every day to live up to that moniker by verifying the accuracy of every story we publish. To return to Pope Francis's entreaties to disarm the world by choosing words that diffuse conflict, I believe the best way to do this is to publish verified facts. Facts without bias, facts without an underlying agenda. Facts in their raw state are socially empowering. However, modern-day polemicists are experts at riding the superhighways of modern communication, the social media networks dominated by Facebook, X, and TikTok. Yet, the people who run these social networks have fought tooth and nail to avoid being held accountable for the veracity of information that floods across their apps each day, every hour. In announcing plans to abandon fact-checking in January of this year, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg talked about a cultural tipping point that favored more free speech. But he also said the decision to end fact-checking would lead to more bad stuff across the spectrum of Facebook products. More bad stuff, I submit, is not what we need. Conspiracies and fake news thrive in environments where there are no constraints on what we call free speech. Returning to the theme of today's talk, disarming words are factual words. When society can agree on basic facts, we stand a greater chance of a unity of direction and with it, peace. But when the facts are called into doubt by professional polemicists, politicians, or people with something to hide, the result can be social fracturing, the very opposite of disarming the world. Artificial intelligence adds a fresh dimension to the information revolution. Generative AI is in its infancy, but it's already clear that despite the billions of dollars of investment in systems such as ChatGPT and Gemini, AI is already deeply flawed when it comes to checking facts. Indeed, recent research shows that instances of hallucinations have actually increased as AI models have become more powerful. Of course, the new information revolution, like Manutio's printing revolution 5 centuries ago, has the potential to open up an era of tremendous opportunity, heralding change across almost every industry. We need to lean into the change, welcome these opportunities, but we need to learn from history. That means holding to account the new superpowers of information, the social media giants and AI giants, and making them adhere to rules that benefit society as a whole, and not just an elite group of shareholders. We need the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, TikTok's Zhang Yiming to embrace Pope Francis's vision of a world where words matter and societies thrive, in his words, on reflection, calmness, and awareness of complexity. I suspect readers in the coming decades will rely instead more than ever on news brands in this room, like the Times and many others, which are dependent on human beings, not bots, with a deep commitment to telling the world the truth. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Gallagher, thanks again. Dottoressa Galloni Alessandra, Editor-in-Chief, Reuters, United Kingdom.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to say a few words about the fraternity of truth and fact. The values that we have been discussing here today, justice, diversity, fraternity, and freedom, are difficult to achieve. But one thing that I do believe is required for them to exist is that we know and we recognize facts and truth. What is and what is not really happening in this world, what is and what is not happening in war zones like Ukraine, Gaza, and Sudan, what is and what isn't really happening inside the world's most powerful governments like the United States, China, India, Russia. The problem is that in recent years, the fraternity of truth and fact has been under constant assault by governments, by guns, by misinformation, by willful disinformation, and, as others have said, if we are not careful, by AI, a powerful new technology that can help journalists in their quests to inform people and to provide facts, but also helps bad actors misinform people. We at Reuters pursue that fraternity of truth and fact on the ground around the world so that we can help many of the other news organizations of the world report the news. And we too do so at great human expense, like others around this table. We've lost 5 journalists over the last 4 years to the main conflicts of the world: Afghanistan, Lebanon, Ukraine, and Gaza. And all of these extremely talented, dedicated, courageous colleagues, a photographer, 3 video journalists, and a safety advisor whose job it was to keep our journalists safe, were on the ground. They were bearing witness so that the world could be informed. In the latest attack, independent journalists were among the victims of a strike on a hospital in Gaza, a location that is protected under international law. And they were present in their professional capacity doing critical work, bearing witness. We have demanded answers and accountability, and we won't stop asking until we get them. We are grateful to both Pope Francis, who paid tribute to journalists who have died or who have been jailed in the line of duty, and defending a free press and praising those in the media who courageously report, as he said, on humanity's wounds. And we're grateful to Pope Leo, who has called for the release of jailed journalists and referred to the, quote, gift of free speech and of the press. On our end, we need to keep defending our journalists, upholding the trustworthiness of our journalists and our journalism, demanding the continued protection of our right to bear witness, and pursuing this fraternity of truth and fact. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Alessandra. Gressani Girls, direttore de Grand Continent, Francia.
Grazie Padre Fortunato.
Thank you, Father Fortunato. We find ourselves in a very special situation, and we're quite happy, all of us, with different possibilities to have access to information. If we're honest, we have the same sort of feeling and impression that we're sort of moving in the dark, and we don't know how to deal that. We are in a dark room because we have closed the windows, because it's the night, because we have become blind. There is no more light. So I'd like to share with you a parable, which I think could be very useful to find a way out of this room where we are stuck. And I'm using the word parable very cautiously. It's an apocryphal history. During a meeting in Washington of the former Vice President Richard Nixon and Nikita Khrushchev, the USSR president, well, he said, and I quote, "If your people is convinced that there is an imaginary river, well, you do not have to explain that the river does not exist, but you have to create an imaginary bridge on that river." It's something paradoxical that the first secretary of the communist Russia wants to build the bridges. But this enables us to understand one of the problems we're stuck with today. The US president and his policy shows that it's like a mass of imaginary bridges. He's a specialist, and that sometimes he wants to build not bridges but walls. And some of the images that he expresses give a very effective image of reality. And before this discourse of explosive narration, there are two possibilities. Either we criticize, we take issue with this imaginary bridge. We want to engineers to be accountable and explain why what they say is not corresponding to reality. But the fact checker is in a position which is very difficult, like Sisyphus. Well, one has got to sort of imagine Sisyphus when he was happy. So you can't think of a fact checker that can feel happy. And we are faced with another possibility, which consists in explaining to the people this is this narrative that they are sort of a group of persons who are irrational. Well, if the people is irrational, is important that he doesn't have any leverage on power. And this leads us to a situation which encompasses Silicon Valley and the world of finance. Well, in Europe and elsewhere, I think in both functions are based on the proliferation of rationality, which is inward-looking, and which is confronted with expectations which have been disappointed, have not been met. What can we do confront with that? How can we sort of explain this paradox of Khrushchev in a better way? If the people imagine an imaginary river, it is because they're thirsty and they want the river. Well, in the Western world, we have a sort of a word where we cannot sort of think of something other than catastrophes. And this sort of leads us to sort of hope for destruction to change the present. Well, at the end of the day, we could say that we could be defined on the basis of the apocalypse that we choose will be the end of demography, the atomic devastation. Tell me how you think there will be the end of the world, and I'll tell you who you are. So we have to reverse this rationale and understand how can we sort of inhabit the word of the future. This will be the best way to disarm the word of today. We have to work out a way of how can we sort of inhabit the time that we are living in and to make the word desirable.
Thanks, Gressani. Khan Youssef, editor-in-chief, New York Times, United States, is here with a speech to Motoko Rich.
Thank you, Padre Fortunato. Obviously, I am not Joseph Kahn, the executive editor of the New York Times. He unfortunately was unable to come because of an unforeseen terrible news event in the United States, but I will read his remarks in his stead. Thank you to Pope Leo and to Father Enzo and Cardinal Gambetti for hosting this important conversation. I'm sorry that I can't be here in person with all of you today. I was looking forward to meeting you, and I appreciate the chance to share a few words about the importance of a free, independent media and its role in maintaining a shared reality for people at a time when we're confronting authoritarianism, political polarization, and conflict across the world. At its best, fact-based journalism creates connections and builds understanding across cultures and countries. Our job as journalists is to provide windows where others put up walls. Quality journalism requires reporting that puts us on the ground to witness people's experiences and hear conflicting points of view. It requires that we carefully convey ambiguity and debate when the facts are in dispute, letting the reader process the uncertainty for themselves. Reporting is intended to deepen empathy and challenge easy assumptions about other people. Reporting by the Times and other outlets have helped people understand the experiences of migrants. Emily Baumgartner-Nunn, Nina Agrawal, and Jessica Silver Greenberg showed how migrants in the United States who fear immigration and customs enforcement are skipping medical care, even in the case of serious wounds. In the Middle East, we've sought to tell stories from the perspectives of people living with the consequences of ongoing war and conflict across the region. In Syria, Ben Hubbard, White Assad, David Gutenfelder all explored the experiences of people living in an ancient town, 2/3 Christian and 1/3 Muslim, as they seek to live together peacefully after a long civil war. And in Rome, our team here covered the death of Pope Francis and the conclave that elected Pope Leo XIV. The Times was the largest Western outlet to write a profile of Robert Francis Prevost, positing him as a papabile before the conclave, when most seasoned Vatican watchers did not believe a cardinal from the United States would ever be elected. Fact-based human reporting, independent of party, sect, or faction, is an essential ingredient of democracy. It creates information that allows people, voters, to make their own choices. Yet, press freedom and democracy itself are under threat across the world. I hope that together we can find a unity of purpose to stand up for truth, freedom, and the free press. Free people require a free press. Thank you.
Thanks.
Grazie, Dr. Motoko. Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you. una bomba.
Described what has happened in the world in the Nobel Lecture in 2021, and it was the only way I can think of to talk about how horrific this public information ecosystem has become. And who knew that it would get even worse? My heart goes out to Dima, to Alessandra, to news heads who have lost people. We are living through an information Armageddon where facts are under assault, truth is being murdered. This is, as my colleagues here, the news heads have said, the casualty is trust, making it impossible to communicate and to govern. The casualties mount daily in our newsrooms, our communities, our democracies. This week alone proves it. Citizens demanding an end to corruption face deadly violence in Nepal and Indonesia and trigger political realignment in the Philippines. Israeli strikes killing negotiators in Qatar. Russian drones shot down over Poland. Government collapsing in France. A conservative activist killed at an American university. These are not isolated incidents. They're symptoms of the systematic destruction of our shared public information ecosystem. When first social media and now generative AI exploit our biology for profit, inciting fear, anger, hate, rewarding the worst of who we are. I told Pope Francis, you know, when lies spread faster, when lies spread 6 times faster, that's an MIT study from 2018, it actually goes against the 10 Commandments. It rewards the worst of who we are. These are weapons of mass destruction to our humanity. Their algorithms spread infection. The 3 sentences I've said over and over and over since 2016, I first said it in Silicon Valley. Without facts, we can't have truth. Without truth, we can't have trust. Without these 3, we have no shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problem, let alone the existential ones like climate change, right? We can't have journalism. We can't have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our democracies, and the trends are clear. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. As of March this year, VDEM said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rules. We're going to face 3 critical battles. I'm going to summarize them, and then 3 solutions, we hope, right? First, the battle for truth. When deep fakes can destroy reputations, when micro-targeting and information operations can manipulate elections, when lies travel faster than facts, we must act. When it's a battle for facts, journalism is activism. Platform accountability isn't censorship, it's safety. It's restoring democracy's immune system. Second, the battle for human agency. Algorithms that amplify our worst impulses, that reward outrage over empathy, that trap us in bubbles of our own biases, these are not inevitable. They're choices. We can choose different values. We can design for human dignity. Third, the battle for the future we want. Will artificial intelligence augment human potential or replace human judgment? Will the internet serve humanity or humanity serve the internet? Each of us around this table, anyone watching, we can't solve these problems alone, news group by news group, nation by nation. The internet, disinformation knows no boundaries. The solutions, our response, must also know no borders, which is why we must think of what radical collaboration, let me say that again, radical collaboration means for each of us. Thank you always to the Vatican for bringing us together in this. I've seen what happens when we fail. I've watched democracy die in real time, one viral lie at a time. In the Philippines, the Duterte administration filed 11 criminal charges against me in 14 months. Nearly a decade later, I still can't travel freely. I needed the Supreme Court approval to be here today, and very thankfully, partly because it's your request, they gave approval for me to travel. But here's the other part. Crisis always brings opportunity. I've seen what's possible when we act with courage and conviction. We have 3 paths forward, 3 solutions that I hope can restore information integrity and rebuild trust. First, journalism. That's why we're all here. We must return, and I think you've heard this from everyone, we return to our fundamental mission, serving the public interest. Today, as Dima, as Sergio, as Alessandra, this requires tremendous courage. Providing context when algorithms reward controversy, choosing verification over virality. Please, I beg you, we must stop feeding the platforms that are destroying us and build our own communities of trust, which leads to 2. Second, our community. At Rappler, we've learned that survival depends on communities of action. When Duterte attacked us, our community helped crowdfund our defense. I warned our sales team it's not a sustainable model when our crowdfunding increases every time I get arrested, but we kept going. When algorithms tried to silence us, our communities came out, they amplified the truth. We must build networks of trusted news organizations. They're around the table. Trusted news organizations that are federated systems that can connect people, real people, in a shared reality. Third, and this is the part I would love to throw to every news head here, technology, right? So journalism, community, and technology. I got tired of begging big tech to prioritize facts. It's really boring. So 3 years ago, we at Rappler built public interest technology, an open source, decentralized matrix chat app that allows real people to communicate without algorithmic amplification or manipulation. This is what the future of news must become, technology that serves human connection. We can choose different values. We can design for human dignity. I implore you to think about radical collaboration in these times. We need to think differently. Pope Leo and Pope Francis before him asked us to, and the hashtag we debated for hours, hashtag be human. This is why we became journalists, to help our people understand our world and to understand each other. Today, to restore what technology has systematically destroyed. We know what creative destruction means. Again, from 2021, we are standing on the rubble of the world that was. Now it's time for all of us here to create the world we want. The future isn't written in code. It's written by the choices we make. All of us. This is a powerful table. All of us together. And we have to do it before it's too late. Thank you.
Thanks. No. Just one moment now, because we have the Cardinal Gambetti here for one little great.
Grazie, faccio un breve intervento.
Well, very quickly, I would like to really express my really gratitude for all what you do. And we would like to encourage and really support you, because also what I've heard, all your speeches are highlighting the importance of being bold in what you say, be courageous, speak truthful word, to tell the story that sometimes are voluntarily hidden. And really, I would like to appreciate and honor those who paid with their life for the service they give to mankind. A service that goes through the world, and a service that is so important that sometimes is really essential for the story and evolution of societies. And so really, I would like to thank you from the deep of my heart and encourage your work. Keep going. And I would like to underline only one point. The ultimate goal of an authentic journalism, journalism at the service of society as a whole, is the conscience of each of us. The last ultimate goal. What do I mean by this? That freedom of press is essential. Equal access to information. Each one has a right to be informed, to be aware of what is happening around them. So these two pillars are essential. And this is essential for connection amongst people, relations, growing mutually as brothers and sisters. And each of us can become more or less human, can decide to become more or less fraternal. And this is a key factor for all our societies, because the more people are involved in the humanization process, understanding each other, mutual understanding, being in deep communion with our brothers and sisters, the more we have it, the more the world that is globalized. I think nobody can imagine that you can live in your village without being contaminated or influenced or engaged by others, by the other worlds around you. So the more this global community develops, the more the more happiness we will have around us in the future. There will be more space for happiness. At least this is important, and this is why we let aside individualism, and we know all the forms of manipulation that can really make certain pressure. Technology should not be used as a tool to this end, but it should become the end, the very end of our activity, of our activities. And our future at this point becomes so dark. This imaginary bridge is collapsing. There is no other future if all this happens. So I'm here to thank you, to encourage, and I wanted to share something that lies to the heart of all of us. The more we develop and bring about fraternity and recognize, acknowledge each other as brother and sister, and grow in humanity. And the more you grow in humanity, the more you recognize the others as brother and sister, because we have no enemies. We imagine our enemies, but each one living in the world is a gift for the world, is a gift for all of us, and is receiving a gift. That is to say, us. We are a gift to them, and they are a gift to us. Thank you very much for being here, and really sure that this table will nourish us with a lot of information and ideas. We need to collect ideas from you. You are in the forefront. We would like to have food for thought. Help us to be more informed, because we need to grow along those two pillars, fraternity and humanity. Thank you so much.
Senti. Grazie, Eminenza.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I give the floor to Rod Davies, Executive President of the Sky News Group, UK. Your Eminence, as you said,
opportunity, right? And so thank you on behalf of the many Sky News journalists all around the world, e I miei 200 colleghi di
my 200 colleagues of TG24 here in Italy. I wish to very warmly thank Pope Leo, Father Enzo Fortunato, His Eminence, Most Reverend Eminence, in the Holy See. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Executive Chairman of Sky News, based in London for the American media company Comcast, NBC Universal. And I think that for today's session, I go back to comments that His Holiness Papa Leone made to other representatives of us in the media just days after his election this year. He said he wanted to reiterate the Church's solidarity with journalists who are imprisoned for seeking to report the truth, and to ask for the release of these imprisoned journalists. The Holy Father went on to call on all of us to safeguard the precious gift of free speech and of the press. We greatly appreciate the solidarity of the Holy Father and of the whole Church with journalists unfairly imprisoned or otherwise detained, or worse, for simply trying to report the truth, to do their jobs. And it's important that we continue to rank freedom of the press alongside freedom of speech among our gifts that need protecting, because, I would argue, one cannot exist without the other. I mean, simply stated, it's our job to check things out. Things are freely expressed, and we are free to check those things out. Also to convey events as they are, and not as we might like them to be. And I will admit this complicates the conference's call for disarmament. Right here on the European continent, we have colleagues covering a hot war that is well into its third year. And in situations like that, the disarmament of language is difficult to match with the lack of disarmament of conflict. At the same time, we must consider, all of us, and I think the proceedings demand some introspection, whether, as a profession, we have upheld completely consistently our best and most transparent values. There have been journalistic failures, and when journalism fails, we enable bad actors who would constrain these gifts that we have been given. Good hygiene, transparency can help renew confidence in our work. Technology is dramatically disrupting the way people search for news, but the old ways, too, were not necessarily good. At Sky, we see AI as potentially a reset which can support quality and citation and brand. Equally, we do see peril if we repeat the errors of past technology transitions, and there have been many such transitions and many errors made. But ultimately, there is an opportunity in this moment for quality. The Holy Father also said in those same remarks that we are living in times that are both difficult to navigate and recount. And of course, that is when these principles are most important, in difficult times. Personally, in those times, I would go to Paul's letter to the Romans, the apostle saying, "Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not," and going on to call on the Romans, us, to provide things honest in the sight of all. Now more than ever, we need to act with the greatest care and honesty and with great confidence, facing the public and the people we cover. And so thank you again for providing us this forum today.
Thanks, Rod. Now, Shiab Hayewa, giornalista e cofondatrice.
We give the floor to Naisha Shihab, journalist and co-founder Narashi TV.
Colleagues, friends, fellow seekers of truth. It is an honor as an Indonesian journalist to join this gathering. Indonesia, the world's third largest democracy and the largest Muslim majority nation, is home to 270 million people whose unity in diversity is extraordinary, and where journalism is not abstract but essential to balance between difference and dialogue. Let me begin with a memory. In 2004, I'm still a young journalist. I stood in the midst of the devastations of the Aceh tsunami that took hundreds of thousands of lives. I saw loss everywhere. Yet in the grief, I also saw small acts of courage. Survivors finding hope in fragile stories, shared on battered phones, spoken gently from person to person. In that moment, journalism was no longer about headlines, but about holding hands in darkness. For 2 decades, I have listened to stories, some whispered in fears, some shouted in protest, all longing to be seen and respected. These voices remind me that journalism is not only about facts, it is about people. To practice journalism with a human face is to protect people's dignity, even when it's hard, and to resist mere sensationalism, even when outrage brings clicks. It is to lift voices long overlooked, so every story can bring us closer and rebuild trust. But today, this task is harder than ever. Digital platforms amplify anger, spread lies, and profit from division. Conspiracy theories poison families. Disinformation corrupts elections, and hate speech sets communities on fire, while deepfakes blur what is real and slowly break our trust. Yet I have also seen the opposite. In Indonesia, young people fact-check politicians live and take to the street demanding transparency and accountability. Communities mobilize relief faster than governments. Climate activists connect across borders with speed no states can match. In Indonesia and across the world, citizens are reclaiming their power, using their voices not to divide but to unite. And I think this is the lesson. Technology is not our master. What matters is how we choose to use words, not to divide but to heal, not to wound but to restore, not to inflame but to bring us closer. As artificial intelligence reshapes our world, that becomes even more urgent. In an age where machine can create words, images, even whole realities, Our humanity must stay at the center. Technology may mimic our voices, but it cannot feel. It cannot listen with compassion. It cannot hold hand in darkness. It cannot look into another's eyes and recognize dignity. It cannot choose love over indifference. That remains and will always remain our human task. And it is from this belief in our shared humanity that I return to the place that shaped me, Indonesia. On our program, Mata Najwa, leaders share the stage with citizens in encounters of accountability and empathy. And when leaders refuse to attend, the empty chair left for them speaks as loudly as any voice, reminding us that absence and silence must also be named in public. On our program, Shihab and Shihab, I sit with my father, Quraish Shihab, a leading Quranic scholar. His Islamic teachings and dialogue that he nurtured across faiths shows me that diversity is not a threat to belief, but is living proof. To encounter the other is to encounter ourselves, and diversity is not a barrier, but a bridge. Through our Narasi community with more than 300,000 members across Indonesia, journalism moves beyond the newsroom into daily life. We run literacy workshops, digital safety campaigns, and youth empowerment. And through our digital channels reaching millions each day, we strive to nurture the same spirit of dialogue, accountability, and empathy, even on the platforms that so often fuel division. These experiences point to urgent steps we must take together as global media community to make information an instrument of fraternity. We must safeguard independent media from political and commercial capture and nurture media literacy so citizens can stand firm against disinformation. We must lift marginalized voices to stand alongside leaders, protect the safety and freedom of journalists, and forge new alliances with technology and civil society, so the spaces that once divide us can begin to serve our shared humanity. And these are not idealistic hopes. They are urgent necessities for democracy under strains and communities fractured by distrust. And let us continuously remember those who bear this burden most painfully today. In Gaza and across Palestine, journalists are not just witnesses, they have become targets. They fall not with weapons, but with cameras and notebooks in hand. Their courage reminds us why we are here, because words can be walls and shields, but they can also be bridges to the truth. They can destroy, but they can also defend dignity and humanity. To honor them is to honor the principle that lies at the heart of this gathering. As Pope Leo XIV reminds us, before being believers, we are called to be human. Before being anything else, we are called to be human. We need to remind the world that journalism too can be an act of love. There is no greater power than fraternity. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thanks. Now Agnese Pini, Direttore Gruppo
Director of Group QN. Thank you, Father Enzo, for this invitation. I'm very happy, and it's an honor for me to be with you today. I've listened with great interest and great respect what colleagues said from different parts of the world about the words on peace, democracy, and freedom, which are sort of on fire because they do not have any space. But we must say that we in Italy and in Europe today, we are confronted with a context where these words are being questioned more than ever before. We in Italy, our grandfathers have experienced what it means to have no democracy, no peace, and no freedom. And yet we find ourselves in an area which is very difficult of history. The number of peoples in Europe have found they have lost their sense of reality, confronted with a business war, East and West. In this loneliness, the role of journalists and the role of information is being questioned. It has to sort of take into account a sort of type of democracy which was mentioned by colleagues around the table. Europe was in a situation of crisis, and since the major changes in history do not occur in a matter of hours, but little by little, it's interesting to note that the great crisis of the traditional information system in the Western world started 20 years ago and coincided with a slow decline of democracies, where we find today that the leading president of world democracy talking about the need to overcome democracy as a valid instrument. Democracy without information cannot exist. Democracy needs information to live, and so that he can sort of be in the bridge between the people and the power. And information, by the same token, needs a democracy to say that it's free. I was struck by what Sergio Davila said. He mentioned a beautiful sentence from the Gospel of St. John: freedom makes you free, and truth makes you free. Well, for those who are journalists that do not feel that freedom is a freedom that has to do with religion, but with our own profession. The only way in which journalists can sort of practice freedom, which also encompasses truth, is not through the answers that we're looking for, but rather through the questions that we can ask. And that's the sort of we know that there are authentic questions, and when they are authentic questions, as Maria Ressa said, if one sort of talked about personal freedom, well, he might end up in jail. But we have to sort of express true questions as free human beings. So the task of journalism is to ask authentic questions. And sometimes I fail to do that. But it is by doing that that we can obey to our conscience. As Cardinal Gambetta said, I was very struck by what Jerome Fenoglio said. Well, you don't sort of proclaim freedom, but you have to get things organized to achieve freedom. So at the time when information is confronted with a crisis, you need the support of public opinion, and you need to have a sort of a support so that we realize that the democracy is in a state of crisis. And I am struck by what politicians say sometimes, that they want to have a newspaper close because it's as if they were acting against freedom of expression. So hopefully, we hope that we can reach a different solution to that. Thank you.
Grazie Agnese.
Thank you, Agnese. And now the floor goes to the director of Sole 24 Ore, Tamburini. Well, I would like to really say that I was deeply touched when I heard what our colleague from Al Jazeera said. I will remember what you said. I remember your gesture, because those pictures you showed us, I will never forget them, and they bear witness on the ground of how journalism should be done with dignity, something that unfortunately we too often forget. chose 4 words to start my speech and my contribution, and I would like to thank for the invitation. Truth, freedom, justice, and dignity. Why did I choose these 4 words? Because these job can be done in different ways, sometimes not in a smart way. But to do it well, we need to be day in, day out committed to tell the truth. And this is an essential element for those who decided to do this. We didn't decide to become a journalist for just money. It was just out of passion. No passion, no reason to do it. And this means being daily committed to tell the truth. And this commitment is just essential for other 2 concepts that follows, freedom and justice. And these are 3 words that are closely linked and connected and represent the only way to express the principle of dignity. We should never forget it. Since I was a little boy, I started doing something in the morning. It's a sort of habit. I'm a creature of habit. In the morning, you wake up and you look at yourself in the mirror. Well, when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, we should do it without being ashamed. No shame. Don't forget it. Never. It was said that in your life, you can do good things, bad things, mistakes, and the positive, you live a positive life is 70% of the things you do are good things. And I wonder every morning, looking at myself in the mirror, if what I did the day before is positive or not. And I invite you to do the same. Is it 70% positive or not? Look at yourself in the mirror every morning without being ashamed. Think about what you did yesterday and think about what you're going to do today is an important exercise. It's a sort of spiritual exercise. As to us as journalists, the best way to be a journalist is telling the truth and follow rules. The rule is tell the story without expressing your opinion. You should be not afraid of facts. And I would like to add that in our profession, which can be a wonderful profession, but sometimes it can have some negative sideline. What is important is to separate facts from opinions and do not tell facts based on your opinion. This is a crime for us journalists. We should not make this. And so the question is, can we really be unbiased in telling the story? Well, of course, you can be philosophical, ideological in answering. Apart from the answer you might give me, we can discuss it. There must be, however, a daily commitment looking for true facts and trying to tell the true facts in the best way to your readers. This is an effort that must be made. Well, I think that we live in a period in which our testimony as journalists can really be very, very important for 2 main reasons. First, President Mattarella reminded about us. There is no widespread awareness of present times. 70 wars around the world. and this is not my expression, but Father Francis said it in 2015. The world is proceeding towards the Third World War. I thought this was a very papal approach, but he was right. 10 years ago, he really saw the future. He was able to understand. And when the story teaches us that when we set the conditions, things can really be no longer governable. And look what happened in the First World War. We're in the same situation. And it is therefore important, essential, to be very stubborn and say clearly and loudly that the strength should not really be dominating, and force should not be dominating, sorry. And it is true that winners write the history, but often the history tells us that certain victories can be no real victories. We have to be strong enough and tell the truth. Look at Ukraine, look at Gaza Strip and the Middle East. These will be a sort of Pyrrhus victory, and we have to give testimony everywhere, every day. Violence should never win over freedom and truth. This is unacceptable. And we have the privilege of being journalists, and we can say loud and clear, we should never forget it. The second reason is that we have social networks around us that are very positive. We should not be scared of advanced technology. We should try to get the best. But there is also a negative side of social network. There are some vicious circles that can be created, and people discuss things amongst them, only with people who share the same opinion. And this is very, very bad, because it kills dialectics. As journalists, we should make every possible effort to tell facts, unbiased facts, but also tell the opponent's opinion. Social networks are creating information circuits where one is discussing only with share-minded people, and this is a mistake, a very serious mistake. We should recover the value of dialectics. I like very much the slogan chosen by the organizer, disarm words to disarm the world. We should not shout, we should discuss, we should believe in dialectic discussion and not oppression, not pacifism at any cost, but having this ultimate goal of a peaceful life, fighting against weapons. And we should be in the forefront as journalists to fight for this. We need a journalism that is governed by a general fundamental rule, that is, stay telling facts, paying respect to life. And words are to be used to build bridge, but not imaginative bridge, imaginary bridge, but real, actual bridges, because only by building bridges we can avoid a fatal mistake for the world in an era of atomic wars. Because if we're going to have wars, these will be atomic wars. And the world has been living in peace for so many years because they very well remember Nagasaki and Hiroshima and the horrors that could come from atomic bomb. But after more than 80 years, the world has forgotten, and we have the duty to remind the world every day about it. We should strongly say what was said by Pope Leo XIV. In the audience, he followed the line traced by Pope Francis. And this morning he said, no to the war as an instrument to solve conflicts. And we, journalists, have an important job in our hands. We are there to promote a common conscience, and we should never, never forget it. And I would like to close with 3 reflections. First, we must be in the forefront. We have to bear witness and promote values. The downfall of ideology has killed values. And we, I think, have to give our utmost contribution to restore a system based on values. Second, children, all children are born to be happy. And we have to remember this day in and out. They should not be tortured or killed. They're born to be happy, and we are accountable for this. Third and last, remember these words. The wars are decided by a few, but many are killed. Many die, and the word should be given back, the floor should be given back to the many who are killed.
Stiamo andando bene nel rispetto.
Okay, we are good in terms of timing. Thompson Mark, CEO, CNN, United States.
Today, a great conversation, a great series of statements. I've really found it very valuable. I thought I'd begin with that word parable, a very well-known one, and a piece of etymology, a bit less well-known. The parable is the story of the sower who throws his seeds everywhere. They fall on the path among the rocks and thorns and all the rest of it, but they also, some of them, fall on fertile ground where they produce a rich harvest. And it's one of the parables Jesus tells us what he means. He says this is a parable about spreading the word of God. That also often falls on deaf ears or people who haven't got the time. But when it does hit home, it changes everything. Etymology. We know exactly, I think, from the story, what kind of sowing the farmer is doing. He's putting a hand into a bag. He's not dropping seeds into a row or drilling holes and dropping seeds into them. He's taking the seeds and spreading them in an arc in front of him. Okay? So the Brits only come up with a word for this in the early 18th century, 1720s, 1730s, and the word they come up with is broadcasting. Casting, throwing the seeds broadly, widely across the ground. Well, I like etymology, and I learned this about 20 years ago. Ever since that moment, I've thought of the sower and the parable of the sower as our parable. That's what we do. That's exactly what we do. We throw the seeds out very widely. Often we miss the target. It's the wrong time, the wrong program, the wrong fit, the wrong moment, whatever. But sometimes we hit home. And that point that Graham made, that fantastic, glorious motto of the BBC, nation shall speak peace unto nation, which, by the way, the authors of the motto are thinking of the prophets Micah and Isaiah there. This is a millennial peace brought about by broadcasting. That points us to what broadcasting at its best, it's often not at its best, but what at its best it can achieve, which is, it's not just about the truth. I mean, the truth is very important. It's also about encouraging people serendipitously to bump into the unexpected, and in particular, to bump into experiences, people, cultures, ideas they weren't looking for and didn't know about. So you learn how the other half lives. And reconciliation, the idea of understanding and therefore feeling a common humanity with other people, genuinely, broadcasting could potentially aspire to do. So it's potentially a wonderful thing. Often in practice, messed up, paternalism gets in the way, potentially putting advertisers and the kind of people they want first can get in the way, so commercialism, broadcasting, big transmitters, big institutions, very prone to governmental capture. So there's lots of ways it can go wrong, but at its best, the idea of the serendipity of the seed and the unexpected audience is there. And I raise all of this because to state the obvious, and I think people have said this in a number of different ways, and by the way, when I say broadcasting, I mean both literal broadcasting, radio and television transmission. I really mean traditional mass media. Traditionally, in the heyday of newspapers, they had a very similar effect, for example. I say all of this because in many ways, the age of broadcasting is, if not coming to an end, is certainly not what it was in many, many countries. And what's fascinating is what's replacing it, and many of our speakers have talked about this, is something which is very close to the other kind of sowing. Think of a farmer with a mechanical device sticking something sharp into the ground and dropping one seed in after it. I mean, brilliant at matching the end user to the content. Boom, boom, boom. I mean, engagement, because you're giving people exactly what they ask for, exactly what they need. And by the way, that's often a good thing, not a bad thing. But the loss of serendipity and the loss of that sense of, which you get with broadcasting, of a synchronous community, a lot of different people hearing and seeing and listening to the same thing at the same time, being able to talk about it the next day, that goes. So what I want to say is, not can we roll the clock back. I think that's impossible. People like more choice. They love their devices. They love their phones. I mean, as you know, in the developing world, you'll see people who have nothing other than the phone. I mean, the phone seems to be their one possession. But how can we keep the spirit of, and kind of by reinvention, some of the benefits towards fraternity of broadcasting, not by, as I say, reviving the technology, but by thinking about how we capture it in different ways. And I've got a few thoughts for you, not a complete list. The first one is, let's not give up on the audience. I often hear people in traditional media, basically with a kind of cultural pessimism about whether there is still an audience for high quality content and for international documentary or for arts or for education of almost any kind. I've a passionate personal belief that they're out there, that there are literally billions of people on this planet who would like to understand more about their world, and who the fertile ground, in other words, is there. It's kind of hard to hit, and you have to try to hit it, as it were. But I believe that belief in the possibility of fraternity, which is a humanistic belief in human nature, actually, in the positivity of human nature, and a natural, innate, we have many, many qualities as creatures, but one of our qualities is a curiosity and fascination about other people, which can turn to hostility, but can potentially turn to respect, mutual understanding, and even love. And I think believing that people like that are out there and trying to find a way of reaching them Super important. Secondly, and we haven't heard enough about this today, I don't believe, Lampedusa, everything must change so everything stays the same. We need to really fundamentally dig down and think about how we're going to do this. It's going to be in entirely new ways. At CNN, we are literally trying to turn the thing upside down and try and figure out fundamental new ways of how do we get to news to people, how do we understand how they live, how they want what they get, how do we connect with them in that way. I think trying to find ways in which we, as makers and publishers, as sowers, if you like, of this stuff, can reach out to people are the ways. Maria's Matrix Protocol, I think, is a really interesting example of, it's typical of Maria, by the way, do it yourself, creating a potentially extensible global platform from kind of mission control in Manila to try and give not just Rappler and her company, but people all over the world a new way of connecting and achieving some of the goals of social media, but yourself, controlled by yourself and dedicated to truth and positivity. But there are many ways in which we have to reinvent ourselves and hold ourselves to account. If broadcasting is failing, that's partly to do with spectrum and new devices. It's partly also about arrogant people with great business models not treating their audiences with enough respect. And to me, one of the most important things we learn about fraternity is it's grounded on respect and a belief in the potential of your audience to understand. So radical change. Thirdly, many of us are being drawn, it's true at CNN, we launched a digital subscription model last year, and we'll be building it progressively, to move ourselves to a situation where we want end users to pay. Now, that's not a bad thing. Books have always been sold. Most newspapers were always sold. Somebody was expected to dip into their pocket and put some coins out. It's probably rather large notes now to get a physical newspaper. But I want to say that one of the great things about the internet and about digital has been the availability of free information. And I just say, even as we're thinking about how to get slightly more aggressive about insisting that people pay for the journalism that they consume, again, I've got a biblical and a kind of another seed-related idea, which is the biblical idea of the gleaners. The idea that once the reapers have taken the best of the crop, there's still some stuff out there. And if you remember in the Bible, Ruth is a gleaner. The gleaners then come and get and subsist on what's left. So, in practical terms, take your paywall down when there's a natural disaster or a very big news story. Think about metered models. For example, at the New York Times, as Joe knows so well. Not Joe. In other words, that you let people sample a lot of news before you actually insist that they pay. There are many ways in which we need to remain open in the spirit of broadcasting, even as the economics are forcing us, in a sense, to get realistic, because without business models, we can't make the thing play. Fourth point, particularly here in Western Europe, but it's in many other parts of the world as well, public service broadcasting matters. And even if the public service broadcasters are going to be as significantly digital as they're using free-to-air broadcasting, these are existing institutions explicitly, you heard about the BBC, committed to and held to account for socially valuable content. It's nuts to let them wither on the vine now. Now, there are many people who say you don't need them anymore because of digital. I would say if you look at, for example, journalism around the world, we need public service investment in journalism now more than ever. So I would just say support the institutions you've got. It's so much easier. I mean, reforming institutions is hard. Here we are. Trying to create a new institution to replace them is much, much harder. Also, I would say straightforwardly, we need public policy on AI. authoritarianism and the physical attack on journalism, but moreover the attempt to capture and destroy journalism is very big. And finally, my last point, all of the issues we're talking here today are more serious and more fundamental in the global south, in the developing world, than they are in the north, where most people still have a choice. Maria and I are co-chair one effort to get, ultimately, we hope, hundreds of millions of dollars available to invest in socially positive, engaging, connecting journalism across the global south, a very ambitious plan. I would say whether you back that or back something else, thinking very hard about countries where there are genuine, complete deserts of the kind of media that helps achieve these goals is really important as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomson Mark. Stiamo arrivando al...
We are coming to the end. Vera Susan, Director, RPS Noticias, Peru.
Buenas tardes. Gracias, Padre Enzo Fortunato. Gracias al Papa León.
Thank you, Father Fortunato. Thank you, Father Leon XIV. Thank you because you invited us to this shared discussion. I would like to speak about mass media as media that give a service that gives visibility to invisible, telling the story of invisible people with a human face, so that we can close the gap between rich and poor and promote dialogue and listening. In Peru, we always live at the brink of crisis. The political intellectual of Peru, Sanchez, said that we are on the brink of chaos as a country. But this is the greatest crisis, as a historian said. And we, Peruvian, have always been on the brink of a chaos and a crisis, but we are also resilient. We know how to do better. We always had the luck to have journalism, and journalism is turning words into bridges and not barriers. In the 80s and 90s, we had terrorism in our countries. 70,000 Peruvians were killed. As RTPP, we always informed people. We had radio broadcasting. We had phone calls, people calling, and we were listening, giving them light in the darkness. We were living in darkness because terrorists were destroying the communication towers. We were in the dark as a country. We had curfew. We couldn't go freely out in the streets. And our only way to survive was listening to the radio. I remember the earthquake in Pisco in 2007, degree 7.9 in Pisco. And the phones were not working, no radio, no internet at the time. And what was left? The radio. And what the Interior Ministry do? They said, listen to the radio because we will broadcast messages via radio. The radio was the only public service to inform the population that had this terrible situation. Remember May 2020, Amazonia. You can think that there are barefooted children walking in the woods, that there are elderly resting. This is true, but we have to remember that Amazonia is a place where we also have invisible community for the government. We have, in the age of terrorism, in the period of terrorism, we created a direct line so that people could call us. Now they can send WhatsApp. We have new technologies, so we can communicate with the people living in Amazonia in case of emergency, if they want to report anything. And we had the leader of the community who called us and said, we have no vaccine, nothing. And we get healed thanks to herbs and herbal drinks. We had to take a flight from Lima to Quitos. From Quitos, we had to take a boat to reach the place. 14 hours, 30 to reach a place in that country. It's easier to fly to Rome. And thanks to the radio, we can report the fact that there are no medicine, no doctors. So we reached out to Bucapuro, and you saw us how we live, and you can tell our story. This is just an example. The radio helped them to communicate, to speak about their situation. We give them visibility. We give them a face. We were the first mass media who went to Bucapuro when there was no airport. We spoke to the people, we explained what was happening and how these people were living. I personally didn't know how they lived. And we can provide them with a service. We arrived them first, and then the authorities arrived with COVID tests, vaccines, etc. Radio was the only one giving a service, but we want to give more visibility to invisible people. There are illegal mines. The forests are pulled down. We have drug trafficking. And 57 indigenous leaders were killed. Not only leaders, but also journalists reporting facts are threatened. And we are there. We are there to support them, to defend their rights. Many people feel isolated and they're resentful, and citizens might really feel frustrated, and this frustration can be exploited by politicians. We must be agents of change. We must be a light in the moment of darkness. We must get rid of fake news. We have to fight against resentfulness. There will always be fake news, but today they are quickly spread around. There is MIT study of some years ago that clearly demonstrates that fake news are retweeted more often because we are in a world full of information. We have a lot of information, but we are less wise. We live quickly. Everything is so quick, and nobody stops and reflects about the truth. The words can be viral in an unprecedented manner. The nets set the conditions to stimulate aggressiveness, verbal harassment. The nets, in many cases, promote extreme opinion and positions, and we should fight against this type of journalism. No polarization. And when Father Enzo Fortunato said, how can we nurture this? What is the indicator that can measure fraternity? I thought about it. We have this platform I just presented that has been created 39 years ago. People can report what's happening. We receive 800 reports every month. Of course, sometimes these are minor things, but usually people report facts that happened, real facts, and we can step in if the authorities are doing nothing. So we have this platform. Then these cases are reported and discussed. So journalism doesn't mean only present cases or events. Journalism is service. Journalism is giving light to darkness.
Thanks, Susanna. Ora la parola a Vileia Riccardo.
We now give the floor to Vileia Riccardo, Director of the Global Group in Brazil.
I'm very happy to be here to reflect on the role of journalism in building a more fraternal society. Despite the clear differences in how the word is used in journalism and in the church, I believe it's precisely that element, the word, that shapes the sense of community at the heart of our concerns. And if you are living in a global context where words are increasingly used to spread hate and intolerance, to fragment communities and erode public debate, then it's crucial that we come together to think critically about how we can change this reality. I would like to briefly outline a recent chapter in my country's history, starting in June 2013. At the time, Brazil was hosting the Confederations Cup, a warm-up tournament for the World Cup the following year. A small protest against an increase in the cost of bus fare in São Paulo grew into the largest popular demonstrations Brazil has seen in this century. Millions of people took to the streets in cities across the country, protesting against all levels of government, all political parties, under two slogans. It's not just 20 cents, referring to the fare increase in the bus, and no World Cup, in response to allegations of overspending and corruption in the construction of stadiums. It was a powerful display of democratic energy, given the scale of the public participation. But there were also signs of social strain. Many of those demonstrations ended in vandalism. They began with millions dressed in green and yellow, singing the national anthem, and ended with hundreds dressed in black, destroying public and private property. The June protests left behind a sharp drop in popularity for all elected officials and a deep discrediting of politics in Brazil. One of the most frequent demands was to end corruption at all levels of government. That demand helps explain the widespread support for an investigation that was just beginning at the time and that would later lead to arrest of powerful politicians and business leaders, the Operation Carroche, or Operação Lava Jato in Portuguese. It is striking to see how those massive protests, which seemed to signal a united population striving for a better country, were followed by years of deep division in Brazil. As Operation Carroche progressed, that division became clearer. Half of the country saw the investigation as long-awaited justice, reaching the rich and the powerful, breaking the logic of a country that had always imprisoned the poor and ignored white-collar crime. The other half saw it as politically motivated persecution carried out by conservatives who supposedly couldn't accept the rise of the poor made possible by a left-wing government. Operation Carroche was very consequential. Among the most significant were the conviction and imprisonment of former and current President Lula and the impeachment of President Dilma Rousseff for misconduct. It also led to attacks on journalism by left-wing activists who accused the media of being biased and partisan against a leftist government. From that point on, Brazilian politics moved at a fast and turbulent pace with little dialogue and a lot of conflict. In 2018, Jair Bolsonaro, Lula's main opponent, was elected president. We responded to critical coverage by treating the press as an enemy. Attacks on journalism now came from the far right and became more violent. Eventually, Lula was released and re-elected president. His former opponent is now in house arrest, convicted yesterday of attempting a coup. Supporters on both sides disagree on everything and don't listen to each other. And this is where social media plays a central role. Its algorithms create bubbles of single-minded thinking. People are fed more of their own ideas, often radicalized, with little exposure to opposing views. Those who think differently, those in the other bubble, are seen as opponents to destroy. This is exactly the opposite of what a free press at its best offers. Plural journalism that promotes dialogue around different ideas. In Brazil, as in many countries, attention to this kind of journalism has been declining, replaced by the dopamine hit of social media posts that confirm what people already believe. A lot of the damage to journalism's credibility is being done by extremist groups that have chosen traditional media, newspapers, radio, TV, as their enemies. Their strategy is to discredit these outlets so that they lose authority in reporting and verifying facts, and to replace them with a parallel reality, the so-called alternative facts. A study by NetLab at Federal University of Rio de Janeiro shows how this works. Here's a summary. Messages attacking a specific outlet or a journalist are first tested in small groups to see which ones have the most viral potential. Then, slightly different versions are spread to find the format that best fits the radical narrative. Based on those results, the message is launched to a wider audience. The next step is to keep the attack trending for as long as possible. The damage to reputation is done even if the facts are corrected later, because the algorithms don't deliver the corrections to the same bubble. Grupo Globo is celebrating 100 years of existence this year, in 2025. TV Globo broadcasts 10 hours of live journalism every day. And Globo News, our cable news channel, it's 24 hours a day. Our news website, G1, publishes 20,000 stories a month and reaches 50 million unique visitors. Our main newscast, Jornal Nacional, is watched by 30 million people every night. All of this content is produced according to editorial principles published in 2011. Allow me to read a short section that I think has a good definition of what we do. A media outlet practices journalism when its central purpose is to seek knowledge, produce understanding, and inform. An outlet whose primary goal is to persuade, attract followers, or defend a cause engaged in propaganda. One operates in the realm of knowledge, the other in the sphere of political and the ideological struggle. A newspaper owned by a political party, for example, may still be called a newspaper, but it does not practice journalism as defined here. It reports facts, analyzes them, and offers opinions, but always with a bias, the bias of the party, and always with one purpose, to win followers. That's propaganda. This is fundamentally different from a general interest news outlet, one that reports facts, analyzes them, and offers opinions, with the conscious intention of avoiding bias, striving to reflect reality as accurately as possible. Grupo Globo will always and exclusively operate outlets whose purpose is to seek knowledge, produce understanding, and inform. There is no instant or disruptive solution to undo the impact of coordinated attacks that aim to weaken journalism and fuel a digital environment of conflict and misinformation. But I believe that when journalism helps communities develop a spirit of fraternity, we are moving in the right direction. Still, the current context, marked by distrust and attacks on institutions, demands new actions. I'd like to highlight a few in response to the questions posed to us. First, We need to take part in the current debates around the legislation to fight misinformation, but without compromising any aspect of values like freedom of expression and individual liberties. We also need to be involved in discussions about how social media algorithms work, making sure they are transparent to the public, and not keeping reinforcing ideological bubbles that become more and more radical. We must pay close attention to how journalism's business models are evolving, especially after 2 decades of digital transformation. We need to make sure that the search for new ways to fund journalism doesn't come at the cost of editorial independence. I also strongly believe we need to help our audience better understand the complexity and the hard work involved in producing and distributing news in a professional way. It's a process that involves people, technology, funding, and infrastructure. More important, we need to be transparent about our values, our methods, our practice, our decision-making process. Raising awareness about the way we do our work is fundamental to keep earning the trust of the public. To close, I'd like to quote St. Augustine, a major inspiration for Pope Leo XIV, and perhaps the first great thinker of language and communication as we understand it today. And I quote, the gift of speech was given to men not so that they could deceive one another, but so that they could express their thoughts to one another. I hope that by following this simple and powerful idea, we can keep working toward journalism that seeks truth and use words to build a more humanistic and fraternal culture for the whole world. Thank you very much.
No mic. No mic.
Sorry. Ci stiamo.
I think that it is very important. We are mutually listening to another. And here we have the spokesman, the director of Osservatore Romano, we have the prefect, we have all the most important representative of the dicastery for communication. Now we give the floor to Jay Wallens, President and Executive Editor of Fox News Media.
Thank you, Father Enzo. As a TV producer first, I did collapse my comments here so we could actually get to some conversation. So just a few quick points, and then I'd love to speak with all of you. As Father Enzo said, my name's Jay Wallace. I work with Fox News in New York. I've worked at Fox since its inception nearly 30 years ago. And I've watched us grow from a single cable news channel with a new voice to a company and news organization with massive influence across linear networks, digital sites, social platforms, radio, podcasts, and book publishing. And all those platforms let us reach millions of people in America and around the world with our high-profile interviews, smart opinion, fearless field reporting, and storytelling. Of course, as we tell these stories and cover breaking news, we must remember the subjects are people, with parents and children, neighbors, and friends. Dignity requires we treat people not as characters or caricatures, but as individuals. We all must remind ourselves that we cannot reduce their lives to quick clips or captions. Because when we keep dignity at the center, our coverage is not only captivating, but it also can do so much good in protecting the vulnerable and giving a platform to the powerless. In an increasingly fractured world, the news brings people together in real time. Every day in America, Republicans, Democrats, and independents on our platforms remind us that disagreement does not have to prevent discourse, nor should it ever provoke political assassinations as we just experienced a mere 48 hours ago. Truthful conversation should bridge divides and help bring peace to contentious wars of words. Our job is to set the table for these domestic and global conversations. It's our responsibility to help people hear each other and to learn other perspectives. People may not always agree with each other, but understanding them can be a vital step. Of course, uncovering truth requires humility, a willingness to double-check, to correct, and to add context. It requires us to sometimes publicly pronounce we don't know the answer, but we'll work hard to find out. And in our world today, the growing prominence of social media and AI has added a whole new layer to evaluating the truth, as we've all mentioned today. As the speed of information continues to increase, we can watch events on the other side of the world unfold moment by moment, but a commitment to the truth often requires us to slow down, take a breath, to perhaps bring less heat, but more light. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives us the freedom to speak. The principles of truth and dignity demand we exercise that freedom for the greater good, and we will try and will continue to live up to that every day. Thank you all. You are all amazing journalists. I have learned from you, and I applaud you. Father Enzo. I kept it short. I wanted you to be able to ask some questions.
Yes. Now there is one question. Colborne, BBC. No? It's okay? Okay. Thanks. Thanks again. So, if there is just 2 questions. Also the director or the editor-in-chief for our colleague.
I think maybe we should ask the Osservatore Romano to answer a question. The editor of Osservatore Romano maybe want to say something. Possiamo dare la parola magari anche all'Osservatore Romano.
We can give the floor to the Osservatore Romano.
Yeah.
Grazie.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I was invited as a person who was here to listen, but I'm happy to take the floor. As I say, to say that I have been listening and I have taken notes of that. That is my job at the Osservatore Romano. So I've listened to many speeches which are of great interest to me. As I was listening, I was sort of thinking, which could be the word that could help us disarm the word, as it said in the title of the meeting. Well, words may not be enough to stop the word. If words are not accompanied by witness, just a sound, sort of an empty exercise, but a kind of word that comes to mind that could disarm the word is that of forgiving, saying, I forgive you. When I say to somebody else, well, I forgive you, I call him by his name and I look at him in the eyes. So the words are not enough. It's the physical presence which is important. But when I'm saying to a person, I'm forgiving you, I'm telling him you are certainly more worthy than your actions. And I say this because in journalism, people are sometimes inclined to simply saying, well, point at you because you have done that. Pope Francis used to say we have to go beyond the culture of the attribute, to move to the theology of the names. So we should look at each other in the eyes and call ourselves by our names. So I forgive you, and I recall here what has been done by someone that has done that, Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela used to say the best weapon in the world is the forgiving. Pope Francis has repeated every day of his mandate, I forgive you, and compassion. Well, and this is something that the world needs. We have to understand the word, the request of faith, of water, and try to build a bridge, which is an authentic bridge. The true bridge is the divine capability if man can forgive the insults and the wounds and create a fabric of fraternity. Thank you.
Dell'ordine dei giornalisti.
There is a president of the Order of Journalists, Guido, sorry. Guido Dubaldo. It's a great honor to have been invited to this prestigious roundtable. I would like to thank Father Fortunato. I would like to greet all the colleagues, Italian, foreign colleagues, and all the directors and people who participated in this important meeting. Today, it was a very important day, and I feel very close to the Al Jazeera colleague. Not only people died, there are more than 300 people who died in the Strip of Gaza, and we reminded them with a rally with thousands of people in the street in Rome, and we said, stop with the genocide. Those who survive are living at the mercy of all others, famine, destitution, everything. They're trying to kill journalists, but journalists must tell the truth, and the light must be on, because otherwise there will be only darkness in Gaza. And this is a very important event, because the situation is very challenging. In Italy, we are ranking now in a lower grade in terms of protection of journalists. There are journalists who have to have their police guards with them because they're working in the mafia area and they need protection. We need to do something to protect journalists and to spread the light. And all what was said around this table is very important, and very happy that Father Enzo Fortunato organized this. We are close friends. And everything started from the Charter of Assisi that we signed a few years ago. And we said that the words are stones, and words are stones are used to build bridges and not to pull up walls.
Io penso che nelle conversazioni.
I think that in the conversations that we're going over dinner and tomorrow during the General Assembly, there will be the opportunity to pick up some of the themes which we mentioned. We're going to meet tomorrow morning here in the main hall of the Orazio Curiazzi, and this is the General Assembly, and many of you have been invited to submit your contribution there. There's just one piece of information by way of conclusion. You've been very patient. Letizia, where are you?
Era giusto un avviso, un minuto.
1 minute. Microphone, please. No.
Because we are a small new foundation focused on the human being. We are studying human being as person is, not as it should be. And we are promoting with the Fratelli Tutti Foundation a symposium about deconstructing the enemy, because there are no natural enemies. Enemies are constructed by personal interest, and we are focusing on how mass media and also influencers and persons in social media can help to deconstruct enemies everywhere. So we are inviting you. We will be here to give you more information. We are very faithful that this human meeting is gathering so much richness in the world, and we want to open a new, small, practical way for media, inviting other stakeholders, not also media, also companies and advertising, etc. Thank you, Father.
Thanks. Bene, c'è chi lavora e io ho 2 avvisi di servizio adesso. Scendendo dal Campidoglio ci sono i taxi che ci portano all'aperitivo, alla cena, e il Comune di Roma, nella persona del sindaco, ci dona questa medaglia. Poi domani sarà presente anche lui all'Assemblea Generale alle 9, il sindaco di Roma Gualtieri. Spero di non aver dimenticato niente, un grazie e buon lavoro ancora, buona cena. Andiamo avanti, eccoci qui.